It started with 3 desperate knocks that echoed through my quiet home just before noon. When I opened the door, my widowed neighbor stood there with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face, holding a small wooden box as if it carried the weight of her entire world. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for food. She simply looked at me with eyes full of fear and heartbreak, and in that single moment, the peaceful life I had carefully built after years of loneliness was about to change forever. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can transform lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps our community continue sharing stories that remind us humanity is still alive. For nearly 12 years, my life had followed the same gentle rhythm. My name was Grant Mercer, and after retiring from a long career repairing clocks, I had grown comfortable with silence. Every morning began with coffee on my front porch, watching children ride bicycles to school and neighbors hurry toward busy lives that no longer belonged to me. The afternoons were spent restoring antique watches in my workshop, while evenings usually ended with a book beside the living room window as the last sunlight disappeared beyond the maple trees. Some people would have called my life lonely. I preferred to call it peaceful. The small house next door had been occupied for years by a cheerful couple named Meredith and Colin Harper. Colin was the kind of man who never walked past someone without offering a smile or lending a helping hand. Then one spring afternoon, everything changed. Colin suffered a sudden heart attack while gardening. The ambulance came quickly, but it left without him. The neighborhood changed after that. Meredith, once known for her colorful flower beds and joyful laughter, slowly became almost invisible. She still cared for her home, but the flowers disappeared one by one. The curtains remained closed more often than not. Her shoulders seemed to carry an invisible burden that grew heavier every month. People offered sympathy at first, but life moved on for everyone except her. I often wondered whether I should check on her more frequently. Yet I respected her privacy, believing grief needed space. Then came those 3 knocks. Standing in front of me that afternoon, Meredith looked exhausted. Her usually neat hair had become untidy, and her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the small wooden box she carried. Without speaking much, she explained that someone had been leaving anonymous notes inside her mailbox for nearly 3 weeks. At first they seemed harmless, suggesting she sell her home because it held too many painful memories. Then the messages became stranger. The writer somehow knew details about Colin's belongings, including the existence of a wooden keepsake box he had hidden shortly before his death. That box was now in her hands. She admitted she had never opened it because Colin had asked her to wait until she truly needed it. After receiving the latest threatening note that morning, fear finally overcame hesitation. She didn't want to open it alone. I invited her inside. The kitchen suddenly felt much smaller as we sat across from each other with the box resting between us. It was beautifully crafted from oak, polished smooth by Colin's own hands. A tiny brass key unlocked it with a soft click. Inside were old photographs, several handwritten letters, and a worn leather notebook. At first glance, nothing appeared valuable. But as Meredith slowly turned each page, tears returned to her eyes. The notebook wasn't filled with financial records or secrets. Instead, Colin had spent years writing about ordinary moments he treasured. He described rainy afternoons spent baking bread together, vacations that hadn't gone according to plan but became unforgettable memories anyway, and countless little reasons he loved his wife. Near the end of the notebook rested a folded envelope labeled only with Meredith's name. She unfolded it carefully. Colin wrote that he knew his heart condition might someday take him away unexpectedly. He feared Meredith would close herself off from the world after losing him. He begged her not to let grief become her permanent home. He encouraged her to trust people again, accept help when she needed it, and never mistake independence for strength. The final sentence seemed almost impossible. It read that if she ever found herself unable to carry the weight alone, she should knock on Grant Mercer's door because he had always been one of the kindest people Colin had ever known. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. I hadn't realized Colin saw me that way. Meredith quietly admitted she almost ignored that final request for months, believing she needed to survive entirely on her own. Only now had desperation finally pushed her to honor her husband's wish. Something changed inside me that afternoon. Loneliness has a strange way of convincing people they are protecting themselves, when in reality they are simply hiding. Over the following weeks, helping Meredith became part of my daily routine. Sometimes I repaired broken shelves around her house. Sometimes we sorted through boxes Colin had never unpacked. Other afternoons we simply shared lunch on the porch while talking about ordinary things like weather, gardening, or favorite childhood memories. Neither of us realized healing had quietly begun. Then another anonymous note appeared. This one was far more disturbing. It demanded that Meredith surrender the notebook if she wanted the harassment to stop. That made no sense. The notebook contained only personal memories. Or so we believed. Curiosity led us to examine it more closely. Between 2 pages, hidden so carefully it was almost impossible to notice, rested another folded sheet. It wasn't a letter. It was a property survey. Years earlier, Colin had quietly purchased a narrow strip of neglected land behind several neighborhood homes. His dream had been to transform it into a community garden where families could gather together. Before beginning the project, his illness had worsened. He never had the chance. The survey explained everything. A local property developer had recently been attempting to purchase several nearby lots to build expensive townhouses. Colin's forgotten land stood directly in the middle of those plans. Someone desperately wanted ownership transferred. Someone believed intimidating Meredith would make that happen. Instead of feeling frightened, Meredith became determined for the first time since Colin's passing. She refused to sell. Together we contacted local authorities, shared every anonymous note, and provided copies of the property documents. Investigators soon discovered the harassment came from someone working on behalf of the development project who hoped fear would accomplish what honest negotiation could not. Once confronted with evidence, the harassment stopped completely. The relief on Meredith's face felt like sunlight after months of heavy rain. But something even more meaningful happened afterward. Rather than selling the land, Meredith decided to honor Colin's forgotten dream. She asked whether I would help. Neither of us had much experience creating gardens, but neighbors surprised us. One family donated tools. Another offered flower seeds. Retired teachers volunteered to organize children's planting days. Teenagers built wooden benches. Carpenters constructed raised garden beds. Within months, the neglected patch of land slowly transformed into something beautiful. Children laughed while watering tomatoes. Grandparents shared gardening tips. Families who barely knew one another began gathering every weekend. The neighborhood that had quietly drifted apart found itself connected again through simple acts of kindness. Watching Meredith smile among blooming flowers became one of the greatest rewards I had experienced in years. The sadness never completely disappeared from her heart. Grief rarely leaves entirely. Instead, it learned to live beside gratitude. As for me, I finally understood something I had ignored for far too long. Peace and isolation are not the same thing. For years I believed avoiding emotional attachments protected me from future pain. Instead, I had unknowingly closed the door on countless opportunities for friendship, purpose, and love. One ordinary afternoon, while repairing a wooden garden sign together, Meredith laughed at one of my terrible jokes so hard she nearly dropped the paintbrush. The sound caught me completely off guard. It wasn't because the joke was particularly funny. It was because genuine laughter had returned to her life. That single moment felt like Colin himself would have smiled. Months passed, and the garden became known throughout nearby neighborhoods as a place where anyone feeling lonely could find conversation, comfort, or simply quiet companionship beneath the trees. People celebrated birthdays there, welcomed new babies, comforted grieving families, and shared vegetables with those struggling financially. One unexpected knock on my front door had quietly changed hundreds of lives. Sometimes visitors asked how such a remarkable place began. Meredith would simply smile toward my house before saying that kindness often starts with opening a door before you fully understand why someone is knocking. Before we reach the end of this story, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, or when you found the courage to help someone who needed hope. Your story might encourage another person who is quietly carrying a burden today. Years later, the wooden keepsake box remained safely displayed inside Meredith's home. The notebook rested beside it, its pages worn from being reread countless times. Colin's dream had become far greater than he could ever have imagined. It wasn't only a garden anymore. It was proof that compassion grows when people choose each other over fear. As for me, I no longer spent every afternoon alone in my workshop. My mornings still began with coffee on the porch, but now they often included neighbors stopping to wave, children bringing freshly picked vegetables, and Meredith walking across the lawn with 2 mugs instead of 1. The silence I once protected had been replaced by something infinitely richer. Looking back, I realized my quiet life had not been destroyed by those 3 desperate knocks. It had finally begun. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May we all remember that sometimes the greatest miracles begin when someone finds the courage to knock on a neighbor's door, and someone else finds the compassion to answer.